I found out that my child-free boyfriend of 3 years had a 4-year-old child that he knew about. Yesterday, I broke it off with him. I honestly don't know why I stalled in doing this, but I think I was just in shock and couldn't process the whole situation. There was no getting through this. It was done from the moment I found out. If you didn't know, I found out my ex had a child when we went to meet a financial advisor and accountant before we moved in together. Before I broke it off with him, I decided to meet him in person to get my things back and give him his. I met him in a park in a public place and I went with a friend who stayed nearby. I honestly wanted to know why he did this, why he wasted both of our time, why he couldn't go for someone who either had a child or wanted them in the future. He basically said that he knew when he met me that he wanted to pursue me. Though we've been together for 3 years, I have known him for 5. When we first started dating, he lived 3 hours from me and we moved his business and his whole life so our relationship wouldn't be long distance. We were introduced by a friend of his about 5 years ago, and in the 2 years before we started dating, he was more of an acquaintance that would come into town to visit his friend. His friend and I were close, so I think that's how he got to know a lot about me, like how I was child-free and would never date a man who had a possibility of having a child or wanting one. When he asked me out, I not only asked the friend that introduced us if he wanted kids, but I asked my ex as well, and he said that he never wanted children and he didn't have any. For the 3 years we were together, we also discussed not having children numerous times, so I thought we were on the same page. Clearly, that was all a lie. When I met him at the park, he had a file full of documents and he brought his file so he could explain to me why he did what he did and the lengths he went through so that we could be a couple. As he explained what happened, he showed me proof, especially of the court paperwork. First, that the child, that's how he referred to his son the whole conversation, is actually 5 and not 4. His son recently had a birthday. When we met, unbeknownst to me, my ex was already a father and the baby was a few months old. He had gotten a former ex pregnant and she had a kid and they had 50-50 custody for about a year. According to him though, they weren't together. He was an active father and they had an amicable relationship. As he got to know me and found out the info from his friend, he realized I would never give him a chance because he had a child. I vaguely remember him visiting and all of us going to lunch with other friends, and he and his friends kept bringing up strange scenarios that would make me change my mind about dating men with children. For example, saying something like, if the guy was perfect for you in every way, but he had a child or wanted children, you would never be with him? And my answer was always no, because my perfect guy didn't want kids. Knowing that I would never date a man who had a child, he decided when his child was 1 that he had to get rid of that responsibility. I'm not joking, that's what he said. He slowly started to see his child less, and it was bizarre listening to him methodically explain how he removed himself from every responsibility that had to do with his child. From lessening the days he saw him, to not picking him up from daycare, to not going to doctor's appointments. He did this over months until his ex saw that he was serious about not being involved in any way but monetary. He eventually went to his ex and told her that he wanted to terminate his rights. He would pay for child support more than what was required, but he didn't want any responsibility. In addition to that, he paid his ex to go to court with him to change the child's last name and remove his and just leave the mother's name. Once the child's last name had been changed, child support had been set up and he terminated his rights. Only then did he ask me out. He said he did all of this for me so that we could have a chance and that he wanted to come to me child-free as well, which is why he waited for everything to be settled in court first. So he basically spent a year getting rid of his child, and he presented it as a challenge he went through to get me, and he didn't understand why I saw that as completely scary and unhinged. To finally throw away everything related to his old life, he then moved to my city and started again. I asked him if his parents knew about his child. He said yes, that though they didn't like his ex, they were active grandparents until he decided to terminate his rights. Once he did, his whole side of the family cut the child off, wanted nothing to do with him. I have met his family and extended family many times, and not once was the child mentioned. How do you do that? How do you just deprive your grandson of a relationship with your side of the family just because your son decided to end his involvement? He told me he would give me time, but that I helped him realize that he was child-free and that we belonged together. I told him that it was over and I never wanted to see him again, that there was no fixing this, and I left him after that. I'm now figuring out how to leave the city immediately, but I can't for a few months since I have a job contract to fulfill. In the meantime, I'm looking for another job far away and avoiding him and his family who keeps trying to get in contact with me to explain his side. I've also ended the friendship with the friend who knew he had a kid and went along with the lies. I know that his other friends in the city we live in probably knew as well, but I have no proof of that. However, there's no way only one friend knew, especially since a lot of them have been friends for decades. I just don't understand what the end goal was here. I don't understand how he doesn't see how wrong he was in what he did. I don't understand how he thought he could make a whole child disappear. Though I am child-free, children should be protected, should be loved and cared for, and eliminating yourself as a father figure and then having your family withdraw their involvement is going to have a severe impact on this child once they understand. I know I did nothing to cause this, but one day this child will realize his dad gave him up to be with a woman he barely knew, and I just can't imagine the trauma that is going to cause. I can't believe he did this to me, and more importantly to his son. son. He has shown me he's capable of anything, and my main goal is to now leave the city. Before I leave though, my plan is to tell everyone, and I mean everyone, about what he did. But for now, I'm laying low and just going to ignore him for my own safety. Whoa, dude, that is like this deserves like a Netflix special. Oh my God.
Here are just some red flags that I ignored while dating. Number one would be the first date. When the first date, he was asking me about like why my ex and I broke up, and I was like, I don't really want to talk about that. My ex had like a whole other girlfriend. Like that story is a story for like a month, and also like it doesn't even fucking matter. It was like, well, no, like we're here to get to know each other. Like I don't want to just like talk about the weather. Like let's get deep. And I was like, he's so fucking right. He is so right. So we did just that. We got very deep, and he knew all about the fact that my ex had a whole other girlfriend while we were dating on the first fucking date. It's like, hi, how are you? I'll do the oysters. And yeah, like my ex like cheated on me. Like it was so lovely. And then I knew all about him and his past. And it's like, why did I let that fucker convince me that it was normal for us to just be like trauma dumping on each other because we're getting deep? Like I am the bitch to fall for that because like I love getting deep. So he really knew what he was doing. He kept this energy up. Like the second date, I remember sitting, we were like talking, getting drinks, and he was like, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you in a relationship? And I'm like, I can't say that out loud. Not on our second date. We were just laughing. Like, you want to hear all about my essay in my past relationship? Absolutely fucking not. I was like, this is a safe space. Open up. And you know my dumbass, and like like I'm gonna open up. So I did just that, and it's like embarrassing. I saw this on a TikTok a while ago where the girl was saying like if they're rushing to see you for a second date, like that's a problem. Like if they're trying to do a second date within a day of each other, that's a problem. And I like always kept that in the back of my head. Mind you, this guy was like, we did our first date, and the next day he's like, let's do a second date. I'm like, abso-fucking-lutely. Everything that bitch said to me on TikTok went through this year and out that year. I was like, yes, like why shouldn't we? So another red flag I ignored was like the speed of everything. Everything just went super quickly, and I was like, well, we're like soulmates. Like, why would it not? We were not fucking soulmates. I was dumb. Also, never saw this man's apartment, and we were talking for like over a month. That's weird. Like, that's the thing is, if they're not inviting you to their place, or you've never even seen it once, like there's something wrong with that. I don't know what it is, but it's a red flag. Next red flag I ignored was when he was asking for tips on how to be an influencer. Listen, that's embarrassing. It was not like he was asking about my job and like how I became one. He was more asking like, how do you do it? Like he wanted the tips and tricks to like become an influencer. Like, I'm talking posting schedule. I'm talking like what camera angle. Like that's a problem. But my dumbass was like, yeah, no, really, like this is it. You really do 0.5, like it's so good. 3 to 5 times a day, be authentic. Like, why was I giving tips on how to be an influencer? Go to part 2. The next red flag that my dumbass ignored. My gut feeling. My gut was like, whoa, Livy, this is moving like super fucking quick. Like this is so quick. And I was like, shut up. Like I was just ignoring that gut feeling, and I don't know why. I feel, you know what, I do know why. I feel like when you have someone that's like so persistent and so like, oh my God, like when am I gonna see you again, all these things, you're like, oh my gosh, like when am I gonna see them again? Like why is my gut freaking out? My gut's just freaking out because I'm just anxious. Like that's what it is. It's like, no bitch, your gut is telling you to slow the fuck down and you're not listening. That's not the first time that I've ignored my gut feeling. Like my gut, it's your intuition. My intuition literally was like, I feel like my ex is living a double life. He was living a double fucking life. So it's like your intuition is not going to just tell you those things without it being true. Then it's like anxiety and intrusive thoughts get in the way, and like maybe it's not true and you are just overthinking it. Whatever. My gut and me personally, I knew that motherfucker was not shit, and I just continued to ignore my gut just because I wanted to be a dumb bitch. So if your gut is telling you something, you should probably fucking listen to it. Another red flag I ignored, and I've talked about this before, is the whole like, it's the second date and he's like, what's your love language? Or like the false promises too. Just being like, you're gonna wake up to like 2 dozen red roses. Well, guess what? I'm a bitch. If you tell me I'm gonna wake up to 2 dozen red roses, I'm gonna assume I'm waking up to 2 dozen red roses. But guess who the fuck did not wake up to 2 dozen red roses? Me, bitch. So it's like, why are you just giving false promises like that? I just thought that was a red flag. Also, it's like, it's just the second date. Like, why are you getting me 2 dozen red roses? I deserve it, but like, why? And the love language thing, as I was saying, if they're like really quick to be like, what's your love language? They want to just like become the man that they think that you want. And it's like a love bombing tactic. Those are just some red flags I ignored, and I really don't know why.
Am I the arsehole for leaving my surprise wedding because I felt blindsided? So last week, I was invited to a fancy dress party by my long-term boyfriend, Steve. For some context, we had discussed getting married before, but no plans of an immediate wedding. So as I entered this grand hall, I was shocked. The doors opened and down either side of this big aisle were all my family and friends, acquaintances, all looking super excited. And it became very clear, very fast, that Steve had orchestrated a surprise wedding. Everyone erupted in this massive applause and I just stood there so overwhelmed. I just wanted to cry. Don't get me wrong, I love Steve with my whole entire heart. I dreamed of our future together, but a surprise wedding with no prior warning or consent was quite alarming to me. So I decided to pull Steve over just to express my concerns. I said how I would have absolutely loved a role in the decision making, planning my own wedding, and also a chance to emotionally prepare myself for such a big day in my life. But Steve just dismissed these concerns and said that it was just a big romantic gesture and he thought I would have loved it. And at that point, I felt like I was forced with a really difficult decision. Do I go along with this, just put a smile on, even though I feel a little bit uncomfortable and unsettled? Or do I just stand up to my autonomy and face my true feelings? But in the end, I knew that I couldn't go through with it and I decided to leave the surprise wedding, much to many of the guests' disappointment and confusion. So now I'm finding myself at odds with Steve and my family. Even some of my friends have told me that I ruined such a magical, spontaneous moment. But I 100% believe that marriage should be a joint decision, with open communication and shared expectations of it. Everyone keeps saying, oh, they're so confused because I've always spoken about marrying Steve. But like I say, the problem isn't marrying him, the problem is the surprise wedding. It's the fact that I didn't get a single say in how any of the wedding went, how it looked, what I wore, how I felt, how my hair was. Steve's reasoning for doing this was that I had always said it must be so stressful planning a wedding, so he decided to do it all himself so I wouldn't have to deal with any of that. Like, yes, it's stressful, but I still would have liked the opportunity to plan one. So now everybody keeps asking if me and Steve are going to finish. And I keep replying, absolutely not. I still very much want to marry Steve. And what's making me feel even worse is that I wasted a perfectly good wedding. Okay, time for my thoughts. I completely 100% get where this girl is coming from. As someone who really wants to get married, I can imagine how upsetting it will be not to get to plan your own wedding. But I also get Steve's side and I think it's so lovely that he planned a full wedding so she didn't have to deal with the stress. Let me know what you guys think. Am I the arsehole for refusing to forgive my cousin after she got with my boyfriend? So I've been with my boyfriend since May 2019. So when everything started to lock down, my parents offered for my cousin to come and stay with us. We'll call my cousin Amy. Amy is immunocompromised and her parents work in a hospital, so it made sense for her to come and live with us. And everything was so fine for a short while. So a few weeks into her living there, I was on FaceTime in the kitchen to my boyfriend, who we'll call Steve. Normally I'd just do this in my room, but my dad was on a work call in the room next to me and I didn't want to make too much noise. Amy came in and she glanced over my shoulder and had a look. Once the call ended, she asked who he was. I told her it was my boyfriend and she was like, oh, he's cute. At the time, it just felt like a random comment and it didn't feel like it was going to be a big deal. But after that, anytime I was on a call, whether it be with my friends or my boyfriend, she would try to come into my bedroom. She kept trying to play it off as just wanting to come in and ask me a question, but it was happening a little bit too often. And I would just look at her like, as if like, get out, and she would be like, don't I get to say hi? Which I found really, really odd. I might add, she did not know these people. We went to different schools and she'd never shown any interest in them before. And there was even times when if my phone rang in the room and she was looking over at it, she'd be like, oh, is that the cute boyfriend? And if that's not bad enough, she started to make comments saying that she'd wish she'd have met him first. I asked her to stop because it was very clearly making me uncomfortable, but it continued to get worse. She ended up finding him on Instagram and started sending him all of these flirty, inappropriate messages. He then blocked her and she made a second account to try and message him again. So again, he blocked her. She then went into my room when I was in the shower and got into my phone, found his number and started texting and calling him. He obviously wouldn't answer, so she'd leave him voicemails about how good of a girlfriend she would be for him. She would say how he should leave me and how much she would do for him as his girlfriend. When she wasn't getting a response, she sent him pictures. So at this point I was like, right, nothing's working, I'm bringing in the big guns. I decided to tell my parents and they made her leave. I have not spoken to her since then. And now my extended family are trying to create a little meetup in summertime. I am refusing to go to anything she's at. They say I'm just ruining plans now to be spiteful because she did end up apologising, but it was literally the most half-assed apology you've ever seen. I do feel like a little bit of an arsehole because it means that we can't have any family plans now. And I feel like I'm essentially making our family choose between the two of us. But I don't want to be around her if she's going to keep making me feel uncomfortable. Okay, here are my thoughts. It's very clear that the cousin is a weirdo. And I would feel the exact same way if somebody was like that around my boyfriend. I feel like, however, you could defo give going to a family event a go and just try and keep your distance from her. Sounds like the whole family know that there's a bit of a situation, so they're not going to try and force anything. But what do you think?